Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm Esther Manheimer, Mayor of the City of Asheville, and I'd like to welcome you to the June 22nd Agenda Briefing Work Session. All council members and staff are participating virtually. The live meeting will be streamed on the city's YouTube channel, accessed through the YouTube icon on the front page of the city's website or via the live stream. However, due to technical difficulties, is this still true? I'm just making sure because I see someone's trying to edit it right now. But it says right here, however, due to technical difficulties, this meeting will not be available on Charter Spectrum Channel 193. That was true last time. I'm guessing it's still true this time, and someone will correct me if that is wrong. You do have the option to listen to the meeting via phone at 855-925-2801, meeting code 2009, and watch live on YouTube. We will not take public comments during this meeting, and I'll now turn it over to the City Manager, Deborah Campbell.
Thank you, Mary. Good morning, everyone. Rachel Wood is going to be our moderator, facilitator for this agenda briefing session, so I will turn it over to you, Rachel. I would add, though, that the majority of our time today is going to be spent on following up on your strategic priority goal setting work session. So, Rachel, take it away.
Thank you, Deborah, and good morning, everyone. I'm going to start with a review of the June 27th City Council agenda. We do have one proclamation scheduled for next Tuesday, and that is highlighting July as Parks and Recreation Month. Under consent, as is typical, I'm going to highlight a few items, but please feel free to ask questions on other items that I may not mention. The first item I'm going to bring up to the group is item D. This is a contract for biohazardous waste cleanup. You may recall that in February of this year, Council authorized a contract for biohazardous waste cleanup as part of the ARPA funding that was approved for our litter and cleanliness program. After the contract was approved in February, city staff became aware of a misunderstanding in the bid unit pricing, and this did not become evident until after we started receiving quotes for individual projects from the vendor. We, the city, requested a bid for project hours, and the selected vendor misinterpreted that and thought that meant staff hours. So that was a big differentiation in pricing. Staff were unable to come to an agreement on unit price in a way that honored the legal obligations of the original bid, and so the project had to be rebid. Interestingly, though, the original awardee, who's SteriClean, revised their bid and were again the low bidder. Both purchasing staff as well as public works staff have consulted with SteriClean to ensure we're all on the same page with pricing and contract terms. And so this is just an update to that contract that was originally approved in February with the same vendor for biohazardous waste cleanup. Moving on to item H. Item H is I'm sorry, Councilmember Roney.
Yeah, sorry, I thought there might be a time for questions for that. So since we haven't had a contract, how have we been implementing the downtown and city cleanliness projects that we've scheduled? I know we've had some events with partners.
Yeah, so during the rebidding process, staff have been able to complete several cleanup projects through individual smaller contracts that we have for cleanup, as well as using staff hours for those cleanup efforts.
So have we identified that the need still exists since we have found other ways to do the smaller contracts?
Yes.
If I could, Rachel, it's volume and our ability to respond as quickly as possible. That's why we need the additional assistance with this contract.
So I know that one of the things that's come up in the past is when we make contracts so big, it makes it harder for smaller MWBE contractors to participate. And I wondered if we're doing that again. Is having smaller contracts a way to open up the door for more MWBE? Is this current contract to MWBE business?
No, it is not. And we always, when we are trying to bid these types of projects, we look at the feasibility of breaking off different types of, projects or pieces of that contract in order to enable NWBE participation. This one was not one of those that could be done that way.
Thank you for adding to my understanding.
Absolutely.
Deborah, it said that the lowest responsible bidder is a sole proprietor, woman-owned firm.
So it is women-owned, but not, I thought Kim was mainly talking about African-American, but okay.
Barring any additional questions on that item, I'll move to item H on consent. This is a resolution authorizing a $10.6 million contract with RATP Dev for fiscal year 2024. This contract was included in the adopted fiscal year 2024 budget. And I just want to note that this is the final renewal of this contract. So back in 2017 is when City Council approved the original contract with RATP Dev, and a new request for proposals will need to be developed this fiscal year because this is a 2-year contract renewal. So in FY 2025, that will be our last year with RATP Dev. So staff will be working on developing that new RFP in consultation with, I believe, the Planning and Economic Development Committee, as well as MMTC and other groups over the course of the next fiscal year. Moving on to item L. Item L is the introduction of an amendment to the Code of Ordinances regarding the storage of bicycles and other means of personal transportation on city property. I'm sorry, Councilmember Roney.
I just put my hand in the queue. Go ahead and finish the intro.
Okay, sure. The purpose of this item is to address an exception in the current ordinance that does not specify a time period for how long bicycles, strollers, carts, and other means of personal transportation can be affixed to city property, namely on city bicycle racks. You may recall this item was first brought to the City Council at your April 11th meeting. The item was pulled from consent and then referred to MMTC for their consideration. MMTC heard the item at their May 24th meeting and voted unanimously in favor of the proposed revision with one note that they wanted to update the number of hours for the storage period from 72 hours to 168 hours, which is equivalent to 7 days. So the proposed amendment requires a first reading, which will occur at your June 27th meeting, followed by a vote to consider the amendment at your July 25th meeting. Councilmember Roney.
So a couple of things have come up since the multimodal meeting. I did review that meeting. And I also heard during that meeting, though they did vote to recommend it with the addition of the days that will match automobile vehicles, not just other modes of transportation vehicles. And one of the things that came up is the unanswered set of questions around when property is removed from public property, how long is it stored? How does one reacquire your property? What is the fiscal impact of that? It's certainly not nothing. And so I appreciate that staff did note that there will be a fiscal impact. It's not an identified fiscal impact, but I still am not really clear around. We're going to have some signage, but not in all places. We're going to have property removed, but I'm not clear for how long or how you get your property back during a period of time that's unidentified. Could you maybe help me understand that?
Sure. What you've noted are definitely some of the cons that you'll see listed in the staff report. Bicycles are inherently going to be more difficult to track down the owner than an automobile is. And so those are things that we're going to have to figure out on a case-by-case basis. Staff plans to install signage at the bicycle corrals and then heavily utilize bicycle racks downtown. And we'll continue to add signage based on an as-needed basis. So we don't have great answers, but that's something that we're working through. We do have different facilities across the city where we do plan on storing the bicycles or other modes of personal transportation. And we have space for now. So the timeline isn't necessarily a concern. It would just be more the logistics of how do you track down the owner of those vehicles once they've been removed from the bicycle rack or other city property.
Okay, so I would love to see if some kind of the how to get your property back once it's being removed to go along with this. And then things got a little bit more complicated at Transit Committee this week. So there's a new rider rules and procedures. It seems like the spirit of it is meant to keep pathways clean and safe while you're riding the bus. But along with it is a visual that the transit committee had questions about. And by the time they asked questions, I had to ask questions to even understand what they were asking about. For example, you can bring a cart if it has groceries, but not the same cart if it has laundry. You can bring a scooter if it's not battery operated, or if it is battery operated, that wasn't clear. And if it's used for a mobility device. All of this led me to believe that we're going to have people who have items that they can't then bring on the bus, that they're going to have to lock up somewhere. And does that then get piled in with this other thing that we're getting ready to look at for the consent agenda? And because we don't have a policy in place for how you get things back, I just think that there's a couple pieces that need to be fleshed out before we pass it. But then when I look at the spirit of why we're doing this, and I've walked the streets of downtown every weekend trying to figure out where all these bike racks are that are full of items. And if anything, when I bring my bike downtown, I don't have enough places to park my bike. So if the issue is capacity, maybe we're using the wrong tool, is still a question I have.
We can certainly include information in the follow-up materials regarding how people would get their vehicles back. That's something I'd need to consult with the transportation department on, as well as clarity around what can be brought onto transit vehicles.
And then if that's now going to be part of the consideration because the timing lined up, how do people get their bikes, their carts, their scooters? There's like a lot more pieces now that you can't bring on the bus. So I need to understand how those fit together or don't before I could support something like this.
And yeah, Brad, just for clarification, I think, and Ms. Ronnie, you alluded to this. This is two different things that you're talking about, right? One is the one that's on the agenda related to bikes, and the other are the other things that you just identified.
However, if you can't bring something on the bus, you might have to lock it up somewhere else. And then it falls into this whole, the carts, the mobility devices. It's not just bikes is what I'm saying.
It should be noted that we already have in place an ordinance that covers all property that would be left essentially for several days at a time. So I would lump carts into that right now. There's already an existing ordinance that says if that's abandoned, the city has the right to go in and remove it after a certain period of time. The reason that we're bringing forth this additional amendment is that there is an exception for bikes, which makes all the sense that those are going to be utilized differently than some other personal property. But what we've done is tried to plug the hole to say there is still a limit on how long essentially something could be left or fully abandoned on city property. It only applied to bikes. So this new ordinance only applies to that. Everything else is actually already codified. So if someone left a cart for several days, the city would have the right to remove it. Now, in terms of disposing of that, we hold those things, which does not happen very often, but we hold those things for an extended period of time. And North Carolina law actually already defines how long the city is required to hold on to property before it could dispose of it, which is a considerable amount of time, and it's relative to the equipment and the value of it. Beyond that, I would say it is important to remember with regard to the transit stuff that is dictated primarily by the ADA at a federal level. Because anything that essentially would be required to fit into the aisles creates an ADA violation, and we're not allowed to have those things stored on the buses. So we have limited authority about what we can and cannot allow for buses, and it's really dependent upon the actual spatial allowance within the vehicle.
Well, if anybody else is as clear on this as I'm not, I think we need more time to flesh this out. Because our own document says the current ordinance contains an exception that allows persons to leave or remain unattended any bikes, carts, strollers, or other means of personal transportation. So carts either are or aren't in there. Our document is different than the information we have today. Will the signage that's going to go up explain how people get their items? It seems like the transit and multimodal still had some other questions that we could flesh out if we had more documentation and examples to give. An example I would love to see is where is the equipment that's supposedly sitting around the city? If anything, I haven't been able to find enough bike racks, so maybe it's a capacity issue.
I'm seeing on the report that multimodal unanimously approved this so long as the time frame was extended to 7 days. And I hear your questions, Kim. Does anybody else not want this on the consent agenda at this point? Do we need to delay it? So I'm just trying to get the pulse here so we don't have one council member directing staff to do a number of things regarding this matter. If other council members have a concern about this as well, can you chime in? I can't see everybody on my screen right now, so.
I'm on the multimodal and thought that they had a thorough discussion, and a big part of their discussion was to make this a streamlined approach. You know, some folks who had worked in other cities and transportation departments cited how they've seen very elaborate and extensive programs from this, and there seemed to be a sense from the group that they didn't want to make a mountain out of a molehill. So I'm inclined to reinforce the committee we appoint to look at this and their vote by continuing to have it on our agenda next week.
All right, anyone else have strong feelings? I can't see you, but either way.
This is Sage. I'll just say, I mean, I'm fine to proceed with it. I am curious if we can address this, how you get items back though at a later date. I don't know that that will require a follow-up direct ordinance update to this, or if it's a separate thing, but I would like for people to know how they can get their items back. But I don't think we need to
maybe Brad can speak to that. Whether is it?
I think the plan was, and Rachel, I would invite her to correct me if I'm wrong, is that the signage would include contact information to allow you to come in and to simply reclaim the item. Dependent upon how long something might have been abandoned, you know, it depends also upon what's been abandoned to a degree, but we would give people contact information. I think generally transportation stores those things. We don't have massive warehouses because this, quite frankly, doesn't happen all that often. And to Kim's earlier question, I did check the statute. The exception right now does apply to bicycles, carts, strollers, and other means of personal transportation. That is where the current exception lies. We want to maintain the exception for those items because we do think that they are different than other personal property. But what we wanted to do was not make it an infinite exception. So if someone were to fully abandon something, under the current ordinance, if someone left a bicycle on a rack, as Kim mentioned, our limited supply of racks for 15 years, the city would have no right to go in and remove that bike right now. What multimodal has recommended is that the city would then simply have the right to remove it after 7 days. Obviously, we don't have an individual or staff member going around to every one of these every day. So this would primarily be when we notice them or complaint-based, which would start the clock. So it's probably going to be always in excess of 7 days before any of those things would be removed. But we would provide information on the included signage to allow someone to come in and retrieve those items.
So now there's the understanding that it's going to be complaint based, so that we don't really know what the fiscal impact is going to be yet. I find it strange that we would have a piece of equipment somewhere for 15 years, but I also just once again don't see that level of need. So I don't really see where we're addressing a concern that exists, other than some complaints that aren't being surfaced. So I still have the same outstanding questions around. I know we're not going to be able to put up signs everywhere that people park their bikes. That's just not possible because we don't have enough bike racks. So thank you for adding to my understanding. I probably will not be supporting it as it's drafted.
And just as a quick reminder to close out this item, it will be introduced on June 27th, but then the formal adoption and consideration is scheduled for July 25th. Okay, so moving on to presentations and reports, we do have one slated city manager's report item, and it's another employee recognition for a fantastic employee who received another nationwide certification. So definitely a good news city manager's report item. And then I'm actually going to turn it over to Assistant City Manager Ben Woody to cover the public hearings.
Thank you, Rachel. Mayor, Council, good morning. Assistant City Manager Ben Woody. We had 4 public hearings for this agenda, but item A, as you can see, has been continued to the July 25th council meeting, and item B has been withdrawn from the agenda. So Katie, if you can go ahead and display the image for item C, our unopened right-of-way closing. So what you can see, council, on this is the area highlighted in orange is an unopened right-of-way. This particular right-of-way was platted in 1924. It was at that point called Westview Place, and it's one of the right-of-ways that were platted many years ago that the city never accepted. So it's not a city street. It's just a vacant right-of-way. Properties 26, 30, 34, and 38 Sunrise Drive have requested to close this right-of-way. And what happens when a right-of-way closes is the property that otherwise was in a right-of-way then reverts or is given back equally amongst the adjoining property owners. So they'll maintain ownership of this, what will have previously been an unopened right-of-way. These particular 4 homes are already addressed off of Sunrise Drive in terms of how they receive their mail and how emergency 911 response occurs. So that will not change. They'll maintain those Sunrise Drive addresses. Upon closing of the right-of-way, the owners will record a new plat that will create any necessary easements for access or for sewer and utility access. So that'll be covered when the new plat's recorded if the right-of-way is actually closed. There's no physical impact to the city. Both the Technical Review Committee and the MMTC reviewed this and recommended approval. So unless there are any questions on this one, I will move to the next item. So Katie, if we can display the map for public hearing item B. This is a rezoning request, and what it does is rezones a property at 311 and 319 Biltmore Avenue from regional business to residential expansion conditional zone. Because of the number of units, this request does trip the threshold for a conditional zoning approval, so it is something council will need to approve. The project consists of 2 parcels that are separated by John Walker Avenue. You can see here on the aerial photograph some of the construction that occurred as part of the Lee Walker Heights redevelopment. This particular tract, both parcels total 4.59 acres. The development proposes 2 new buildings that total 221 residential units, include 2,600 square foot of commercial space as well as community amenity space. Of the 221 residential units, a total of 30% or 66 of those will be affordable, with a target of 20% or 44% at 60% AMI and a target of 10% or 22 units at 80% AMI, all for a affordability period of 30 years. Hopefully all that made sense. I feel like I said a lot of percentages in a row in that statement. The project is seeking, as is allowed in the conditional zoning process, projects can seek technical modifications. This project seeking 3 technical modifications. One is for sidewalk construction on Biltmore Avenue. The construction of sidewalks on Biltmore is tied to and necessarily dependent on a transportation project that affects Biltmore Avenue. And we'll talk a little more about that in one of the P&Z recommended conditions. Also a modification to allow 5-foot internal sidewalks to the site as opposed to the required 10-foot standard. And finally, a request to have no bike lanes into the development. So those are the 3 modifications the developer's requesting. Planning staff has reviewed this request for consistency with our Living Asheville Comprehensive Plan. They did find that it is consistent with our comp plan, and staff is recommending approval of this conditional zoning. Planning and Zoning Commission heard this request at their June meeting. They too recommended in favor of the conditional zoning with a 4-to-1 vote. They did add 2 conditions. One is that the applicant will work with the city to ensure ultimately the installation of the sidewalks along Biltmore Avenue. So just making sure that that does occur when it's appropriate. And finally, that the applicant also work with the city to determine and install any needed or appropriate high visibility crosswalks, including a speed table across John Walker Avenue to provide access to both buildings. So that is the conditional zoning overview for this property. I am happy to answer any questions you have on that item. Councilwoman Roney.
As far as multimodal infrastructure, this spot is really close to downtown. I'm surprised that we don't have some more infrastructure for vehicles other than cars. I know one of the things that's come up regularly around this property is crosswalk access, because if folks are coming to and from, it's really difficult in that area to cross as a pedestrian. Do we have a better understanding of if crosswalk access could be made available, and what are the things that are holding back the sidewalks? Because if we're not going to have bike accessibility, a wider sidewalk that meets our rules might better serve as a multi-use path.
Yeah, thank you for those questions. And just a quick clarification. So are you referring to a crosswalk over Biltmore to get from one side of Biltmore to the other?
In and out of the development, yes.
Okay, yeah, I don't know the answer to that, and I'm not sure if Rachel may, but that's something I think we can follow up on that and the follow up to this meeting. Also, I can get a little more specificity on kind of the sequencing and what is exactly the timing issue with the Biltmore Avenue sidewalk. So I'd propose those are two items that we can include in our follow up information. Councilwoman Roney.
I know that transportation can be sometimes up to 30% of people's cost of access to housing. So location affordability being included, not having to have access to a car would make this project more affordable.
Woman Turner.
Thank you. I didn't realize this one was coming up so quick, so apologies for my shock. So this is the final hearing for this. Are we gonna hear anything more, perhaps at council, about the breakdown of all the subsidy, how much we spend, the cost per unit, that kind of stuff we usually get?
Well, that's part of, this is a rezoning.
So this isn't the whole hearing. That's what I was just getting confused at. This isn't the whole hearing for this project. It's just the rezone. Okay, so those elevations are just in there for fun.
But will it come back to us? Because
yeah, I'm kind of confused. This process
is not, because our subsidy here was the land. So it's not, we're not seeing it for consideration. Are we seeing it for consideration for a housing trust fund loan? Or not Luigi, but for a housing, would there be another hearing before council on this project, I guess is the question.
Not to my knowledge.
Right, I do think you're asking an important question, Sage, because it is not going through HCD for a housing trust fund grant or anything like that. It is our contribution to this one is city land, which is kind of I hope that it continues to be a repeated model, but we do need a way to review these and figure out if they make sense. I will say I love the project and concept, and there's a few issues going on here. I am somewhat regretful that we weren't able to many years ago do a fully integrated project with the Housing Authority for the redevelopment of Lee Walker, now Maple Crest, but that ship has sailed. So this is the city's project, but if you look at the number of affordable units we're gaining, I do wonder how the subsidy compares to developments on private property that we use housing trust fund loans to help underwrite rather than the donation of land. Because it may be that it doesn't pencil out. I'm concerned that it doesn't work as well in terms of the bang for your buck, I guess is what. But we don't have an opportunity to hear that analysis in the context of a rezoning.
Well, and maybe we can add more information then, because my concern is that I mean, I'm not concerned about the project. I'm concerned about the public's awareness of how this project came to be. So, we've been talking about one of our goals being a 2024 bond for housing. So this is bond money. I think the community would like to see the final, I know I would, the final evaluation of our investment into this project, this great project, alongside whether or not it has 5-foot sidewalks. So maybe that information can be added. I guess this process just feels a little clunkier than most because it doesn't have those HTF and the WEEG items in there where we'd normally hear it. But maybe we could layer in that information in the staff report.
And we probably did hear this back when the
You
RFP was
did.
awarded. Yeah, it's just been a long time. So, and things have changed and happened and morphed and been edited slightly.
And the
So
terms have
probably
changed, and the AMI, yeah. So just the final, I mean, if someone were to be looking at how this project played out, you would find this conditional zoning in the minutes somewhere, but it wouldn't have much context if this is the only document. So maybe we could just get the whole picture. That would be helpful for me. I don't mean to just be the one person asking for something, but I think it would help.
No, I think it would be great to see kind of a write-up of how Sasha's been preparing the kind of apples to apples comparison for us in her housing trust fund or LUIG applications. It'd be nice if we had a memo or something that just sort of examined what the per unit subsidy ended up being.
While we're talking about memos, what are we considering the value of the land? Like at what time were we looking at the land value that we're adding to a memo like this?
And really the cost of that road needs to be in there. I mean, it was a 1.9 million or 1.7 million road. And I know we did it with Maple Crest, but the whole picture just really needs to be told, in my opinion.
So yeah, and question whether we paid for the road or granted the easement. I know we granted the easement.
Bond money paid for the road.
I don't see anyone nodding their head. Rachel's nodding her head. She
It was
agrees
a
with
last
you
minute
that the
change.
bond money
Yeah, there
paid
was-
for the.
It wasn't the intention. It was a last minute change.
$400,000. I'm sorry. There was $400,000 in bond funding approved for site development that included the road.
Okay, so not
Wait.
1.9.
I thought that was for lights and stuff and streetscapes at Biltmore Avenue. My understanding, I just remember because I was on the committee. Maybe we just need to dig deep dive. We don't need to go into deep here, but I'm pretty sure we ended up hearing it come back. Maple Crest came back and requested the money, and at the last minute it was changed to which pool of funds. So let's do a little digging. This is what I mean. Like the whole picture isn't really clear.
So just real quickly, I think, and I'll defer to maybe Brad and Deborah a little bit, but this is today where the public hearing is really related to the conditional zoning. The conditional zoning was triggered just by our normal development review process. And so the staff report really reflects that. I think there's an opportunity to add some additional supporting information about the affordable housing. I think we want to be, this is where I need Brad. I think we want to be careful to make sure the staff report really, but does reflect just the conditional zoning consideration that's before you as the elected body. So it may be that some of the other information could be put together in another type of follow-up or as part of the follow-up document. And I do think we want to make sure that the conditional zoning analysis stays within the guardrails of what council typically does in terms of comprehensive plan analysis and those types of considerations.
Well, we will
I
have
think that's totally.
conditions, though, right? Well, there will be
Well,
conditions as part of this. So
There will be, but I don't think the discussion we're having now intends for council to veer outside of the conditional zoning consideration at council. I think we're just saying, hey, we haven't really done too many of these city land leveraging into affordable housing projects. This is the first major one after the Hilliard-Klingman project, I believe. So I think we're just asking separately for some analysis to see if this, did this work? Did this make sense from an investment standpoint and the use of affordable housing bond money or any kind of or when we're leveraging land into an affordable housing project? So to me, I understand these are separate issues. The conditional zoning is what it is, and it's a statutory process. So I hope that makes sense. If nobody, I mean, I hear Sage wanting to look this information. I don't know if anybody else is requesting it. I don't want to put an additional burden on staff if no one else wants to look at it, but
Mayor,
neutral.
I think what we can do is go back to the original discussion of the RFP, their original proposal, and the awarding of the transfer of the land and all of those details. We'll go back, recreate that information for you all and submit that, possibly separate from this discussion, so that, as you said, Mayor, that we don't go outside the boundaries of a conditional rezoning process. But we will get that follow-up information to you, to council.
Thank you.
And I'm assuming, I didn't hear anyone say you don't want it, as the mayor has suggested. You all want the information, right? Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, especially since it's already documented. It just, because this is just an unusual thing where we decided a bunch of stuff in the past and now this is the next part to have the context together, I think would be helpful.
Absolutely. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so moving back to the June 27th council agenda, we don't have anything slated for unfinished business, and the final item listed on the agenda under new business is a resolution to temporarily suspend consideration of micro apartment applications and awards under the Land Use Incentive Grant Program until the policy is revised as part of the update to the Affordable Housing Plan to more specifically address standards for micro apartment projects. At the request of the Housing and Community Development Committee earlier this year, the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, which we often refer to as AHAC, was asked to review the LUIGE policy to make a recommendation on how micro apartments should be considered under the current LUIGE policy. After their review of the LUIGE policy, AHAC recommended the temporary suspension of the consideration of LUIGE applications for micro apartments until the broader review of the LUIGE policy occurs, which is scheduled to happen early fiscal year 2024. AHAC also recommended that if council wanted to proceed with micro unit applications, that developers commit to setting aside 50% of affordable units to voucher holders and address several concerns, including whether the incentive should be adjusted to account for the smaller unit size, the demand for smaller unit size, including a limited kitchen, as well as shared kitchens amongst people seeking affordable housing, whether micro housing projects need subsidies in order to be built, and micro apartments meeting qualifications for vouchers issued via HUD and other agencies. The temporary suspension of consideration of micro units under the LUIGE policy was voted on and approved by the Housing and Community Development Committee at their May meeting with a 2-0 vote. Councilmember Turner.
I just want to share, I voted for this based on AHAC's input. However, my support of it did not tie to existing. So we already have a micro unit application in front of us. I just want you all to know that when I supported this, I meant new applications, not the one already in queue, just to be clear.
Okay, so one other note, I'm sorry, I see I have a few more hands.
So
They clarify with me, I definitely watched the HCD meeting that happened most recently, and it seemed like, is this a different project on Aston? Am I looking at the wrong address?
So what council is being asked to approve at your June 27th meeting is the temporary suspension of the consideration of applications for land use incentive grants. So not a specific project. At your July 25th meeting, you will be asked to consider an application for a land use incentive grant at 46 Aston. So what you're going to be considering this coming Tuesday is not project specific. It's the suspension of consideration of this type of project under the land use incentive grant policy.
Thank you for clearing that up for me.
Did I see another hand? Okay. Last note on the June 27th council agenda, we do have one closed session slated for an economic development item. Moving on to council committees, I'm going to let the city manager cover the environment and safety agenda.
Absolutely. We have two items on the agenda other than the normal kind of public comment and approval of minutes. The Noise Advisory Board policy recommendation, which is going to be presented by the Noise Advisory Board. And this is recommendations to reduce excessive noise from loud vehicles mainly. I think it is for concerns for folks who live downtown about trash pickup, and that time seems to be relatively early. And so the action from the committee is to consider adding this issue and resolution to the Environment and Safety Committee work plan. The next item would be the Downtown Safety Initiative, and this is an update to the committee. I'm sorry.
Hey, before we go on to that, I just wanted
Yes,
to,
ma'am.
because I'm getting a couple of questions about this. So I'm not going to be able to be at the council meeting Tuesday. I've got to go down to Raleigh for a Metro Mayor's Conference that starts Wednesday morning and at the governor's mansion. So Sandra is going to be chairing the council meeting. So I know we were supposed to have another closed session that evening, but hopefully it's okay to wait until the next meeting. And I apologize for that. I tried to figure out how in the world to do this trip without missing this council meeting, but it's logistically not working out. So pardon the interruption.
No problem.
Mayor, before we proceed, just to your point, we did have an item on closed session that we're able to push out, but we have a separate item that is time sensitive. So we will have.
Yeah, the economic development. Yeah, you will have a closed
Yes.
session for that.
Yes.
Okay, the next item for this committee, Environment and Safety, and by the way, we meet at 11 o'clock, will be an update on the Downtown Safety Initiative. We will not have a whole lot of specifics. It will be kind of the schedule and a little bit about lessons learned and kind of the path forward in terms of communications with the community about what the next steps are. And I would suggest to you that this is not an end to this initiative. This is a transition. And we will make sure that both the community and council knows all of the details, obviously, before we go with some type of public announcement. And that is it for that committee's work. Want me to continue? I think the next one is mine too. So Policy, Finance, and HR Committee. So Mayor, you won't be at that one as well. And let's see, we have.
No, I don't leave until that.
Okay, so you will be at this one.
On
It
Tuesday.
starts at, yes, ma'am. It starts at 2 o'clock.
Yes, I can. Yes. Yep.
Okay, because we do have two items for.
I just got it.
I'm sorry.
That's
Okay.
fine. Yeah. No,
All right.
that was my plan.
Okay, we've got two items that we're requesting action. The 2024 Event Support Grants and Assistance. This was the discussion that we had, Mayor, I believe, at our last council agenda briefing, that you had concerns about whether we had done the necessary outreach with nonprofits and so forth about the special events. And this has gone to PED, and there was not a decision made. This will be coming, a decision made or a recommendation to full council. We'll be repeating the presentation and requests for some modifications to this grant and program. That will be coming to you, and we'll be asking for the committee recommendation. And then we have a specific project. You all just talked about the Luigi request at 46 Aston for the micro apartments. They're requesting a land use incentive grant, and we'll be presenting information and asking for a committee recommendation. This particular project just recently was reviewed by HCD.
Okay, so now I'm a little bit confused. So what's the interplay with the Luigi freeze?
Policy and the actual project.
Right.
One is a policy that's an actual policy delay or deferral. And
how would that affect?
How
does it affect this project? Let's say council says yes to that Tuesday night. What's the impact on this project?
You would not be receiving this on July, I think the 25th for discussion. Right?
No, that's not right.
Yeah,
Nope.
I believe the plan, Deborah, and staff's recommendation, which was approved in a 2-to-1 vote this week at Housing and Community Development Committee, was to suspend consideration of the 46 Aston project until the affordable housing plan update occurs and the land use incentive grant policy is updated. We have decided to continue consideration of this item, so it's going to follow its typical trajectory, which Luigi projects first go to HCD, then they go to policy, finance, and HR, and then they go to council, but it would not be coming forward with the staff recommendation in favor of it. So it's going to be considered by policy, finance, and HR next week. Still, staff is not recommending to proceed with it, and it will go on the council agenda on July 25th without a staff recommendation.
As well as two committees' recommendations.
Correct.
If we freeze the application of the policy this Tuesday, then
This is
can
an
we
existing
even consider
application.
So is it grandfathered? Is that what?
The application has already been submitted. So we're talking about freezing new applications. And just to, so in case it
grandfathered.
helps, this developer had reached out and said, I need a yes or a no for my project and for financing. So they just requested that it come to council, even if they get a no, just so they know. They couldn't continue to have delays. We've been delaying this one a lot. And I think they're running up against some deadlines. So
That doesn't really make sense. Why would they need a yes or a no for financing? I mean, usually they need a yes or a no so they can break a purchase contract. So
maybe it's that they had their reasons, you know,
Okay.
they had deadlines and they just requested that it be heard.
Because a fuller picture is in the last HCD, when they came before us, Councilmember Turner made a motion to recommend to council for approval. And that motion did not receive a second, so it died. The motion that was brought forward was one that was recommended by staff. And that, I believe, Rachel, was to postpone consideration of the project until the Luigi policy had been further considered. Does that clarify?
Okay, but they were like, we want council to consider it anyway, even though that's what happened at HCD. Okay.
Yeah, and I apologize for misspeaking in terms of it not going to full council on the 25th. It will go to council on the 25th with recommendations from two committees. And the topic for the Policy Financing Committee would be the actual project, Mayor, not the policy.
Got it. Okay. Exercise and futility on deck.
And that's all I think I have from committees.
Okay, thank you, Deborah. And I'll just note that boards and commissions is canceled for July, and we did confirm, it's not listed on today's agenda, but we just confirmed this morning that both the Equity and Engagement Committee as well as Housing and Community Development Committee meetings, which were originally slated for July 18th, have both been canceled as well. So we're going to be using the July timeframe as staff. Now that we've gotten feedback from council on your strategic priorities and your priority goal statements, drafting work plans and putting a lot of effort into that so that coming into August, we'll be able to discuss at the council committee level what we've got on tap for the upcoming fiscal year. Councilmember Turner.
Just a quick share, as we were canceling the HCD this morning, just a heads up to council that Haywood Street congregation, you may have received an email about this, is coming back through with some changes. So they needed to go to HCD and to another committee and get to council, I think, in August. So this won't compromise that timeline, but what it will do is all those meetings will happen really close together. So I'm just kind of flagging it to know that it's coming, and when it comes, it's going to come quick because of these kind of cancellations, which is fine, but just a heads up.
Thank you for that. So moving on quickly to the 8-week outlook, just a quick reminder that we will not have city council meetings July 4th, July 11th, or July 18th. So your next regular city council meeting will occur on July 25th. There are a couple of big items slated for the July 25th meeting. We've already referenced the 46 Aston project as one of them. Listed on the 8-week look ahead currently is the South Slope Vision Plan. It's my understanding that's being moved to August 22nd. Also on July 25th, not currently listed on your 8-week look ahead, is we're tentatively planning to have the vendor contract for the affordable housing plan update added to that item. So really excited about that. More details to come on that over the next couple of weeks. Also want to note that you have no meetings August 1st, August 8th, or August 15th. So your only regularly scheduled city council meeting in August is scheduled for August 22nd. And then barring any questions on that, we can shift to other issues and concerns. And the only item we have listed is follow-up to your strategic priority goal work session that you had last Tuesday. And I will pull up the presentation for that. And Deborah, I'm not sure if you want me to launch directly into the presentation or if there are any comments that you wanted to make as I'm pulling this up.
No, I just wanted to just briefly say thank you, Council, for your work at your work session. I think we've landed in a good place. Believe the direction to staff was to go and possibly look at the goal statements that were developed, massage a little bit, and come back so that you all could have a final review and sign off on the goals. And hopefully with this presentation, we'll be able to identify, here's how we are going to use this information and how we are going to work with you through your committee structure, as well as advisory boards, and being able to kind of come back to you all on a much more frequent basis to update you on progress of specific initiatives. Because I think as part of your work session, we were real intentional about saying, tell us the what and we'll tell you the how. And we need to be as intentional in terms of the how that we report back to council in terms of projects and initiatives to accomplish your goals. So I'll turn it over to you, Rachel, for a more detailed discussion.
Perfect. Thank you, Deborah. And I also want to reiterate the thanks. It was a very productive work session and really appreciate the time that City Council dedicated to this important matter. A couple of key takeaways for today's conversation. Just a quick reminder, your Vision 2036 is a multi-year and aspirational vision that serves as the guidepost for how we deliver services to the community. On an annual basis, typically as part of your retreat, your strategic priorities are set to establish the key areas of focus for the upcoming fiscal year. At your March 2023 retreat, Council maintained the 6 previous strategic priorities with one minor tweak that I'll highlight in a moment, and also drafted 70 statements related to those priorities that were framed in terms of being goals. At your work session on June 13th, Council further revised and created a single goal statement for each priority area to provide clarity in terms of outcomes and intended impacts related to strategic priorities. And we're going to review those goal statements today just to affirm that we've correctly reflected them so that we can use those to inform finalizing upcoming work plans for the next fiscal year. Staff will use these statements to further align our projects, programs, and initiatives across the organization with City Council priorities and goal statements as we look to further improve our strategic framework. So I'm not going to read this, but up on the screen right now is your vision statement. Again, this has remained unchanged for several years. One change that was reflected and discussed at your March 2023 retreat, we previously referred to the 8 items listed on your screen as focus areas, and we have decided to reframe that into your vision framework. And of those previous focus areas, there was one revision made. So on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see we have clean, safe, and healthy environment. That was previously clean and healthy environment, and the word safety was added just to reflect the importance of public safety in the community and to ensure alignment with your revised committee structure, which now includes the Environment and Safety Committee, which used to just be the Public Safety Committee. Moving on to your council priorities, as I previously mentioned, these have remained largely unchanged over the last 2 fiscal years with one exception. Last fiscal year, you had a strategic priority of neighborhood resilience. At the retreat, the decision was made to revise that strategic priority to neighborhood and climate resilience. And then you've seen this diagram several times before, but this really shows the relationship of the different strategic planning elements that the city currently has. So your broad overarching vision statement is then more specifically outlined in your vision framework. Your strategic priorities take that annualized snapshot of what would you like to see the city's trajectory be for the next fiscal year. Your strategic priority goal statements help define intended outcomes and impacts associated with those strategic priorities. And then your council committee work plans identify what should be done to actualize those priorities. And then that's further operationalized through our organizational work plan. As Deborah mentioned, the advisory work plans, individual departmental work plans, and not listed on the screen, individual employee work plans as well. And that's something we're working with the Human Resources Department to further refine over the course of fiscal year 2024. So moving into your goal statements, as Deborah mentioned, I'm going to read through the goal statements as they're currently drafted. We've highlighted a few areas, and you'll note those highlighted in yellow on your screen, where staff made a few recommended revisions based on what we heard at the work session that was not necessarily reflected in the draft statements as they were drafted at the work session. So I'll highlight those as we go, and do want feedback from City Council on if you're comfortable with those revisions or if there are any final tweaks that we need to make to the language as we work to further operationalize the direction we're receiving via these goal statements. So the first goal statement I'll highlight is under the Improve and Expand Core Services strategic priority. And what we heard at your work session was hire and retain excellent staff, improve public-facing amenities, and create an ambitious funding plan for infrastructure investment. That was what was actually documented at the work session. And then we heard a lot of dialogue regarding the 2024 bond referendum. And so we're recommending as staff to add to that statement, including a 2024 bond, just to be specific that that is something that you want staff continuing to work towards over the course of the next fiscal year. So I'm going to pause there and ask for any feedback from City Council on the draft goal statement for Improve and Expand Core Services. Councilmember Roney.
So with the county's budget no longer including funding for the transit study together, I wonder if we need to put somewhere in here a signal to strengthen our partnership, where core services would improve if we had partnerships, so that gives staff, a signal from council that we understand that the work that we need to do can't be done alone.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, you might be recommending, and I'm just going to say this out loud for council, and then we can certainly reflect this in the language: hire and retain excellent staff, improve public-facing amenities, enhance regional partnerships, and create an ambitious funding plan for infrastructure investment, including a 2024 bond.
I would just say, I appreciate that. I think strengthen instead of enhance would reflect my ask. I think there's already work done to have partnership between the city and the county. I just think putting it as a goal statement, bolsters that from our side.
I would be fine with that. I don't know how others feel. I mean, I think we've talked a lot about that, so I think it's implied, but if it needs to be explicit.
Yeah. Does anyone have any concerns or issues of strengthening regional partnerships? If not, all right, you got it, Rachel.
Okay. Any other feedback on improve and expand core services? Okay, then moving on to reparations. Reparations, what we heard at the retreat, and staff does not have any suggested revisions. We think everything that was captured in the discussion is reflected in this draft goal statement, and that is maximize collaboration with the Community Reparations Commission and partners to effectively implement short and long-term recommendations and grow reparations investment by increased funding and continue to look for more revenue sources and partners. Any feedback on that draft goal statement?
And I'm assuming that since there's nothing highlighted about it, it is the statement as we wordsmithed it in our meeting. Yeah, so you're just saying, everybody, did you wake up the next morning and feel the need to change the goal statement?
Okay, so I'm not hearing any feedback, so we're going to consider that one finalized. Moving on to reimagining public safety. And again, similar to what the mayor just stated, if you don't see any highlights, these are directly reflected as they were captured at your work session last week. The goal statement we have is improve community safety outcomes by securing funding and increasing and expanding programming and partnerships to address quality of life issues under the Reimagining Public Safety strategic priority. Any feedback or suggested revisions on that goal statement? Councilmember Ullman.
Mostly just a comment, I feel like there's a lot of work that we need to do around public safety, and we'd spent a lot of the year and budget process talking about really fortifying and reinforcing our police department and the lack of staffing. And I see this as a core service as well. And so I feel like, am I right that as we move forward and as plans are developed and as policy stuff come to us, hopefully there's going to be a lot of work that we do that touches many of these goals and that it can kind of be bucket. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I just wanted to chime that in, but I love the way this came together. This one in particular, I really like the work that the team did on this one.
Yeah, absolutely. The priorities are not mutually exclusive, nor are the committees that the work is assigned to mutually exclusive. So you could have an item, for example, that goes to both planning and economic development, as well as housing and community development. And that's likely the trajectory that the missing middle housing study will take, just using that as one example. So moving on to the homelessness strategy strategic priority, that draft goal statement is make homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring by supporting the implementation of National Alliance to End Homelessness recommendations. Any feedback on that goal statement? Okay. Moving on to equitable and affordable housing and stability, the draft goal statement is maximize tools, plans, and regulations to increase housing supply, prioritize access for low-income residents, households, reduce barriers to construction, and begin preparing to update the Unified Development Ordinance and initiating a 2024 housing bond. In the highlighted section, we do have some suggested revisions. I know there was a lot of back and forth regarding if we should do regulations versus specifying the Unified Development Ordinance. So based on what we heard, this is staff's recommendation, but we certainly welcome additional feedback from the City Council regarding what you want that final goal statement to be for the strategic priority area. Councilmember Ullman, you're on mute.
I just said thank you. I think you did a nice job. I know that we were kind of at the end of the work session and I, for one, was like tired, right? And so I feel like you did a nice job hearing the intent without us having to nail down the language. I especially like how it's kind of getting this conversation started because there's a lot to talk about on what we would do and why and how. And I think this is a really nice signal of the conversation I heard and the interest I have in this. So I appreciate the thoughtful listening and suggested language.
Well, thank you for that feedback, and credit on this one is definitely due to the city manager. She was the final author of that suggested language from staff. Moving on to the neighborhood and climate resilience strategic priority, the draft goal statement states, prioritize resources and capacity across our climate and sustainability plans to maximize impact. And this is as it was stated at the work session. Councilmember Roney.
This is just a general note, and I realize that we are going to get into work plans next, so I appreciate that that's going to be the next appropriate step. There were issues around neighborhood and climate resilience, as well as reimagining public safety, that had some like specific work areas that aren't listed here, while we do have specific work areas for housing listed. So I just think that for me, it's going to be really important that the work plans address some of the issues that were taken out of these to get our goal statement more cleaned up. They're missing some of the work that was named explicitly.
Kim, is that like when we were talking about public safety, there was like this conversation about the audience and kind of the direction of who is impacted the most and how we're going to work on that. And we kind of talked about that's a great place. Is that an example of what you're talking about?
Examples like youth violence and intimate partner violence and violence interrupter programming, and some of those specific targeted areas were named that would be like an action item, that the housing bond is like an action item underneath housing and stability. Mm-hmm. So I'm noticing some inconsistency, and I'm looking forward to the work plans.
Thank you for that feedback. Just want to clarify with the group, is there any revision that you're requesting for the neighborhood and climate resilience goal statement as it currently stands? I'm not hearing any. So kind of as a nice segue, thank you for bringing up work plans, Councilmember Roney. Just wanted to provide an example of kind of the flow of these strategic planning elements as we currently have them planned. So again, in your vision framework, this is one example. And of course, this is by no means comprehensive, but under your quality, affordable housing, formerly focus area, now vision framework component. That item is most directly tied to the strategic priority of equitable and affordable housing and stability. And the strategic priority goal is to maximize tools, plans, and regulations to increase housing supply, prioritize access for low-income residents and households, reduce barriers to construction, and begin preparing to update the Unified Development Ordinance and initiate a 2024 housing bond. Then the council committee that's most directly aligned with that strategic priority and priority goal is the Housing and Community Development Committee. Of course, as we already mentioned, items that that committee considers are not mutually exclusive, and there could be other committees that consider items. And some examples of work plan projects that would fall under the Housing and Community Development Committee. And these are examples. This is by no means comprehensive. We have not yet had the work plan conversation for the upcoming fiscal year with this committee. But 3 items that we know we currently have underway are the Affordable Housing Plan Update. This includes a comprehensive review of all of our affordable housing tools, including the Land Use Incentive Grant Policy. There will likely be referrals to the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee for them to look at policy considerations and make recommendations back to Housing and Community Development Committee prior to recommendations being brought forward to full City Council for policy consideration. Another item on the work plan is complete the missing middle housing study. As I mentioned earlier, this item will most likely go both to the Planning and Economic Development Committee as well as to the Housing and Community Development Committee. And then affordable housing bond considerations for the 2024 GO bond referendum. We're wanting to use the affordable housing plan kind of as that seed, but we will need to make some determinations on how we plan to use and structure that referendum language for a 2024 general obligation bond. So that's just an example of the flow. We do hope to have more direct linkages as we piloted last year with the Housing and Community Development Committee between our organizational work plan as well as the work plans of the individual advisory boards, so that there's more direct connectivity between the work of the advisory boards, the work of the council committees, and ultimately policy considerations that are brought forward to full City Council for consideration. So that's something we're really excited about further refining at the council committee level in fiscal year 2024. So moving on to next steps, in summer 2023, we hope to work with the council committees to finalize the FY 2024 council committee work plans. These will include specific policy review referrals to the advisory boards. Also, throughout the course of the summer, staff will be finalizing our FY 2024 organizational work plan as well as departmental work plans. Summer and ongoing, we're going to continue working to enhance performance management and communication. This is going to include a new website, which we think will go live sometime in August of 2023. Credit to the finance department and our Office of Data and Performance. They've done a lot of great work improving our output measures and developing meaningful outcome measures. That's something we're going to focus on throughout the course of the next fiscal year, is how do we translate those individual outputs and milestones into intended outcomes, and how does that ultimately move the needle for the strategic priority areas that City Council has established. And we're going to have, Deborah mentioned this earlier, more regular status updates to the City Council on the work that we're doing associated with your strategic priorities. This is going to include regular updates at council committee meetings, city managers reports, future agenda briefings, and other outlets as appropriate. In fall 2023, we plan to finalize and present the fiscal year 2023 annual report. Fiscal year 2023 ends at the end of June. And so early this fall, we plan to give you an update and an annual report, which will also be available on the city's website. And then ongoing, as I previously discussed, we're going to continue working with advisory boards to align their work with the initiatives and policy review considerations that are happening at the council level. Any questions on next steps? Okay, so I'll just highlight those key takeaways again. Your vision is a multi-year and aspirational statement that really serves as a guidepost for how staff deliver services to the community. Your priorities are established annually that provide a specific snapshot of what you want your key areas of focus to be for the upcoming fiscal year. City Council has maintained their previous 6 strategic priorities for fiscal year 2024. And as part of your retreat, drafted 70 goal statements related to your priorities. At your June 13th work session, council further revised and created a single goal statement for each priority area. Thank you for the feedback you provided today. We will provide a follow-up document that's got those final strategic priority goal statements for each of you. And staff is going to use those goal statements to further align projects, programs, and initiatives across the organization with your council priorities and goal statements. And so that is all we have. I'll stop sharing my screen. In terms of follow-up for your strategic priority goals. Again, really appreciate the feedback today and the amount of time council has dedicated to this. This is really gonna kind of serve as our guidepost for how staff operates throughout the course of fiscal year 2024.
I just want to say great job, team. I feel really excited about this. I feel like we hear so much demand and concern from the community that we don't row in the same direction. And like, this is really focused. This is the community I want to live in. And I'm excited to work on it with all the women on the team and the men.
Well, thank you for that feedback. This was the only item we had listed under other issues today.
With that, Mayor, if there are no further questions, you can
Anything?
stand
Anybody?
adjourned.
All right, thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you all.